Folks, welcome back. We have our second video for Chapter 11. We're calling it A Twisted Tale of Hard Work. And the problem we're really going to focus on for this video and probably the next one is problem number 1 and 2. But for now, it's just problem number 1. It says, how does DNA, my DNA, help me live a unique life different from others? And how does my DNA help me live a healthy life? So I'm unique, and hopefully I'm healthy because of my DNA. Let's watch a couple videos and see if we can get a better sense of how this is happening. What's the DNA doing to make me so unique? And what's the DNA doing to make sure I'm healthy? Well, firstly, just as a recap, we are remembering that DNA itself is a double helix, and it's made up of smaller, complex structures called nucleotides, and nucleotides even are made of smaller molecules of sugar, phosphate, and a nitrogen base. As you can see here, it's complicated looking. Now, the DNA itself makes things for us. So to live a healthy life, and the way that our DNA helps us live a healthy life is to basically create smaller proteins in our body that build us. They make our cells, they make our organs, and then the overall organism. And that is caused by a specific code. So the reason we're all so unique in life, the reason why one person looks different from another is this code. Because everybody has different code that makes different proteins. So you may have a version of the DNA that has a certain coding that's different from somebody else. But in general, the DNA is used to make proteins. So let's look at that. So let's say you have a long sequence of DNA. Question is, of course, what's it doing for us? How is it making sure we live a healthy life? So let's do a real quick review on what DNA makes, which is proteins. Proteins that do work for our body. They keep us healthy. And everybody looks different. Everybody has different levels of health. And part of it is because we all have different codes for our proteins. Let's look at this for a minute. So we have a section of DNA we call a gene, right? And this section of gene is going to make a specific protein. And inside our cells, we have huge amounts of DNA, and some sections are making large genes, and some are making small genes, but the size of the gene makes basically different size proteins. So a large gene makes large protein, small gene makes small protein, but here's some different ones, right? So we have one gene makes hemoglobin protein, and without the hemoglobin protein, your body would never get oxygen. So this protein is inside every red blood cell, and this protein made from our DNA makes sure we breathe. Our cells also contain DNA that makes a protein called pepsin. Here it is, the little colorful thing. It helps us digest food. Another important protein made from our DNA, and especially makes us different from each other, is this one called keratin, which makes our hair look the way it does, because our hair essentially is just made of protein. So to bring back the point of problem number 1, and how is our DNA helping us live healthy lives? Well, it's helping to make proteins that our body and our cells depend on to function. So it also makes us unique, and we'll study this more in a little while. Some of the slides later will help us see how different DNA code that different people have helps us look different. So different code makes different proteins, and those different proteins make us look different or unique. Here's slide 12. This is just a review. This is the code of a specific gene that helps us feel pleasure. So without this gene, our brains would never feel pleasure. This gene here, located from a real source online, we know the whole, what is it? It's basically made up of over 8,000 nucleotides. And this makes a simple little receptor protein, like you can see here. And this little Y-shaped structure here, this little receptor protein, does the fantastic job of binding certain molecules in our brain that helps us feel pleasure. This gene makes this receptor protein, this little Y-shaped, pinkish little protein. It's essential though. Without it, you would never even feel happy. What's interesting is that research is showing that the times we use social media, such as taking selfies or just posting how we feel online. But anytime we use any of this technology, it offers a crazy brain reward. So this receptor protein we have in our brain, right, is super active anytime we're using social media. So Instagram, Snapchat, Twitter, Facebook, whatever you're using to communicate with the outside world, apparently it's helping you feel pleasure. And without this gene right here, making this receptor protein, you'd never feel it. Alright, next thing up is slide 17, and in your notebook you're going to have to respond to some questions. So we're going to put this slide in presentation mode and try to answer some questions. Right, first thing we want to do is we've paused it basically around 1 minute in for question 1. Question 1 is write the problem or create a question. Remember, a problem or a scientific problem is just a question about baby Riley's disease. So we won't hear the audio from the video, and that's okay. Let's look at the subtitles here, the captioning, and that plus my help will get this question answered. So here we go. So this lady is getting information from a doctor. The doctor has called her and said, look, we've done a genetic test on your baby Riley, and he wants to make sure that the woman is sitting down because the doctor has some really serious information he's going to tell her. It says baby Riley tested positive for cystic fibrosis. Cystic fibrosis has a genetic basis. So write a problem. So here's some options. So if you're going to write a problem, you could say, ask the question, how did baby Riley get cystic fibrosis? Another possible problem you could write for number 1 is, what is cystic fibrosis? Another possible problem you could write for number 1 is, how is DNA involved with cystic fibrosis? So you can rewind if you need to, but you can use any of those 3 problems. But any question you would want to ask about baby Riley having this disease, cystic fibrosis. So you got to write a question about it. Number 2, it says ID, the DNA cause of Riley's illness. So let's look and see. We're going to go to 5 minutes, 25 seconds in, and we're going to see if we can figure out what the DNA basis is for Riley's illness. Here we go. So we're trying to identify the DNA cause of Riley's illness. So pay really close attention to the subtitles as we play it. So, did you catch it? Let's go back one more time. So baby Riley has a tiny error in his DNA. What's the cause of Riley's illness? It's an error in his DNA, and it's 3 letters or 3 nucleotides. So now you have the answer to number 2. So the illness was caused by just 3 nucleotides in a specific gene. So there was just 3 letters or 3 nucleotides in the code of that gene caused cystic fibrosis. So we just found out that Riley has some mistakes in the nucleotides. So an unaffected person with cystic fibrosis, you can see that they have the nucleotides TTT in this situation. But baby Riley was affected with the cystic fibrosis. So the DNA for a specific gene had a problem right here. So 3 specific nucleotides led to a weird issue with the cystic fibrosis. So cystic fibrosis is all about the DNA, right? So let's look at some more models, see if we can better understand just what the DNA was making in Riley to cause such a physical problem that could potentially risk the life of baby Riley. Because if cystic fibrosis doesn't have a proper treatment or therapy, the baby could die. So DNA can make us healthy, as we hope, but it can also make us unhealthy. Our next step is understanding exactly what is wrong with Riley's faulty transport protein. So that means we have to connect the idea of the DNA having an issue with the transport protein. So let's investigate this a little more. Let's review transport proteins. So on chromosome 7, there's some DNA, right? Well, chromosomes are made of DNA, but there's a section of chromosome 7 that had the error. We looked at it before. It's right here, right? So this section of chromosome 7 had some damaged nucleotides. And then we go on to here, and you can see that it makes, on this section of chromosome 7, it makes a specific protein called the CFTR protein. And this is a transporter protein. This is a protein that you would find within the membrane of a cell, and in cystic fibrosis, it's the lung cells. So the lung cells have this specific transporter protein. Let's find out what it does. Let's find a good one here. Here we go. Now we can do. So when the chromosome 7 gene is working normal, it makes this perfect little protein, and chloride ions, which is a charged chloride atom, it flows through this transport protein outside of the cell, outside of a lung cell, and your lung cells function properly and you breathe well. But in baby Riley's situation, they had a damaged gene that made a damaged protein, and you can see the chloride atoms aren't flowing through. In fact, they're not flowing through, and then something is on the surface of the lung cell. It's mucus. So when mucus coats the outside of the lung cells, it's not good at transporting air at that point. So the lung cells are coated in this mucus because this protein made by a damaged gene on chromosome 7 just doesn't work. And when it can't pump chloride atoms across the membrane of the lung cell, mucus builds up. Baby Riley could potentially suffocate. So the question is, what are we going to do with question 3 now that we know this information? So let's look back at question 3, and it says, write about what we just talked about, or create a model to show Riley's faulty transport protein. So you should know the problem. Baby Riley has cystic fibrosis. We know that there was a gene on chromosome 7 that's led to the cystic fibrosis. There was a deletion or some issue with 3 nucleotides on the DNA of chromosome 7. And we also know that the gene on chromosome 7 is supposed to make a good transport protein so lung cells function normal. Make sure you complete 3 now, so pause the video if you need to do that. Alright, our last one is describe the scientist's strategy to help Riley. So what are the scientists going to do to help Riley? Because Riley has that damaged gene from chromosome 7 in all her lung cells. And her lung cells aren't making the right protein. So what are the scientists going to do to try to help her? So to get the answer, to figure out what scientists are going to do to help baby Riley, or at least what they hope will work with genetic technology, I'm just going to hit play on the video and read the subtitles and follow along. So they have a hard time fixing the gene. So in all the cells of her body, they have a hard time repairing the damaged gene on her chromosome 7. So it says this new approach is going to have to do with the proteins. So it looks like rather than try to fix the DNA, they're going to try to fix the proteins. In the video, rather than try to change the DNA in each of the lung cells, what the scientists hope to do is provide baby Riley's lung cells with the correct protein. They're hoping the protein will function properly in baby Riley's lung cells. So how exactly that looks, I'd be interested to find out. But they had 2 options. They could have tried to fix the DNA or fix the protein. Now this video is old. This was made in the 90s, so at this point I have no idea if baby Riley ended up surviving, if the treatment of trying to give the proper transport protein worked or not, but I hope so. Alright, that concludes our second section of slides, and we ended on slide 17. So it was a lot of work, I know. So stay tuned for the 3rd video, and we'll finish up some more, alright? Have a great day.